Hi, welcome to another episode of Organic Vegetable Gardening, where we learn to be better gardeners. I'm Obi, your host, and today I want to talk about two topics. The first is going to be macronutrients, and the second is going to be micronutrients. So we're going to cover the whole topic of nutrition today. And since we're organic gardeners, we're going to talk about the nutrients, especially in the context of how they affect microbes. The first of the macronutrients is nitrogen. Nitrogen is the most important nutrient for your garden, and as a gardener, it's the one you're going to be applying the most, because nitrogen is what plants use the most of. It's the one that gets used up the most quickly, and it's the one that nitrogen is responsible for your plant's green growth. It causes your plants to grow larger. The example of nitrogen that I use is I've got a bag of milorganite. This is the classic kind, so it's a 620. It has 6% nitrogen. Some other kinds of fertilizers for nitrogen that you might want to use are alfalfa. Alfalfa has about half as much nitrogen as milorganite. And another option would be would be fish. A fish extract would have about 5% nitrogen. So these are the best organic sources of nitrogen. And the reason why they're good is because they're relatively slow releasing. Something like alfalfa or milorganite has zero chance of burning your plants because the nitrogen that exists within the product is not accessible to plants. It's in a protein form. Protein becomes nitrogen organically, and that only happens by bacteria consuming whatever you put down. Bacteria consumes my alfalfa, and then a worm comes by and eats that bacteria, and that worm's excretion is what's actually going to contain the nitrogen that my plants get access to. So it's a very slow, very controlled release of nitrogen. And so you can put down an awful lot of it at a time with very little chance of burning your crops. A common source of nitrogen that I don't recommend is blood meal. Blood meal is relatively expensive. It's high in nitrogen, but it's all readily available to plants. Blood meal can burn your crops just like if you used a chemical fertilizer, and so I don't think that's the best option. The second of the macronutrients that I want to talk about is phosphorus. Phosphorus is what's responsible for your plant's growth of roots, as well as for your plant's growth of flowers and fruits. So phosphorus is really important, but one important thing to remember is that in Texas, in North Texas especially, our heavy clay soils hold on to phosphorus really well. So you really need to do a soil analysis before you add any phosphorus to your vegetable garden or to your lawn or whatever. Soil analysis will probably tell you that your soil has all the phosphorus that it can possibly hold right now, so you might not need to add much. The product that I have here is bat guano. It's got 13% phosphorus, and I only hold this up because it's very hard to get an organic form of phosphorus, and the guanos are sort of your best form of phosphorus that is pure phosphorus. It's quickly accessible. The only time that you're probably going to want to add phosphorus to your plants might be as a foliar spray, like for melons. I want to add some guano to my melons to try to make them a little bit larger. So I'm just going to mix it up with some water and apply it foliar. It's a pretty expensive product, so it's not something that I would want to normally just add in. My milorganite contained 2% phosphorus, and alfalfa contains 1% phosphorus, and so does fish meal or a liquid fish product. So those are probably going to be plenty of phosphorus for your garden. An important thing to remember with phosphorus is that we don't want to over-apply phosphorus. We want to use mycorrhizae. The way mycorrhizae work is through an exchange of phosphorus for some other nutrients with a plant. And applying a lot of readily available phosphorus shuts down that exchange, and it causes the mycorrhizae to not grow. The mycorrhizae are really what you want to be growing more than roots. So rather than putting down phosphorus to make your roots grow, apply more mycorrhizae and foods for the mycorrhizae. That might include hydrolyzed fish extract. That would be really high in nitrogen, and it contains the oils from the fish, which is what the mycorrhizae would help to consume and break down. The third of the macronutrients that I want to talk about is potassium. Potassium is what's involved with regulating movements of fluids and nutrients within the plant. Phosphorus is what carries the nutrients from the top to the bottom of the plant throughout the day, through photosynthesis and things like that. So phosphorus is definitely important, especially here in Texas in the heat. Phosphorus. Phosphorus is necessary to help the plants regulate the heat stress that would otherwise occur by moving the water and nutrients up and down the plant quickly throughout the day as the temperature changes. The main source of potassium that I recommend is kelp. This is an example of a kelp product that we make. There's many kinds of kelp that it comes in. You can often see gallons of liquid kelp, and those are about $20 a gallon. Or you can see kelp meal, which is priced even higher. But this is a small powdered extract form of kelp. It's the most cost efficient. This little $5 package can make basically a gallon's worth. And it contains 14% potassium. The reason why I like kelp so much and why it's the preferred form of potassium is because kelp contains lots of hormones. The most important ones is that it contains cytokinins. Cytokinins are a hormone that's responsible for cell division, which is what helps the plants deal with stress from heat and other kinds of damage that they experience. Their cells divide more rapidly, they repair themselves more rapidly. So kelp is a really good form. I recommend applying kelp foliarly directly to your plants with a pump sprayer. And the reason for that is because kelp extracts are up to 8 times more effective for plants when applied by the leaves, because then the plant gets all of the nutrients and the plant gets all of the hormones. Whenever you water kelp in or apply kelp meal to the ground, a lot of those hormones are going to be used by the microbes in your soil. Well, that can be very beneficial in some instances. When you're trying to provide hormones to your plant, you don't want them being consumed with the biomass of your soil, so you apply them directly to the plant. Another option for potassium is molasses. Molasses is a good product, contains a few percent iron, and I use it with all of my sprays because molasses is a great spreader sticker. So by adding in a little bit of molasses every time I spray neem oil, for example, I also get a little bit of potassium, so it's really nice. The other 3 macronutrients that I want to talk about are not always considered macronutrients by people, and they're calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. These are the other 3 major components of soil. Calcium is the first component that I want to talk about. Calcium does the same thing for the soil that it does for people. Calcium creates the bones, it creates the structure in the soil, just like it creates the structure in people's bones. The main way that you want to apply calcium to your soil is through gypsum. This is a bag of pelletized gypsum. Gypsum is actually calcium and sulfur. A lot of times people will talk about adding lime to their soils, and that is not something that you should do in Texas. In Texas, our soils already have an alkaline pH, which means it's too high of a pH. Adding in lime raises the pH. Lime is calcium mixed with some other things that raise the pH in the soil. Gypsum is calcium and sulfur. This will keep the pH in the soil exactly where it is or lower it, because sulfur tends to acidify soils. And gypsum is the preferred form of calcium for Texas soils, and what I would definitely recommend. You can't burn your soil, or you cannot burn your plants by applying gypsum. You can put down 50 pounds per 1,000 square foot to no problem, and it'll make your soil have a much better texture. The next micronutrient that I want to talk about is magnesium. Magnesium needs to exist in a certain ratio within your soil with calcium. Usually we don't have to worry about that too much. Magnesium is not something you need to be concerned with supplying directly to your soil. You really need to be much more concerned with supplying calcium to your soil. Again, with all nutrients, all real changes to your soil and attempts to amend your soil should be done at the recommendation of a soil test. The soil lab that I recommend is the Texas Plant and Soil Laboratory. They use a different extraction method. Different soil labs will determine the nutrients that are in your soil by different methods. A lot of the chemical and conventional labs, like the Texas A&M Soil Lab, use a really harsh acid extraction, whereas the Texas Plant and Soil Laboratory uses the CO2 extraction method, which is a lot more the way that your plants are going to get access to these nutrients in organic soil. So that's the soil laboratory I would recommend. The last macronutrient that I want to talk about is sulfur. Sulfur does a few things. First of all, sulfur is most commonly used to kill insects. Sulfur kills insects, it kills funguses. Sulfur kills pretty much everything except for the few bacteria that process sulfur. And that's what its primary function is in agriculture, is as something that kills. And so you always want to be careful anytime you're applying any product that has sulfur, as pure element of sulfur, onto your property. Gypsum is a little different because the way it's combined with calcium, it's not readily accessible to your plants, and so it won't burn your plants, it won't burn all the microbes in the soil. Sulfur's main function in terms of plant nutrition, however, is that sulfur aids in plants metabolizing nitrogen. The more sulfur you have in the soil, the more nitrogen your plants are going to be able to actually extract from the organic matter that's in your soil. So as an organic gardener, this is really important for us. So gypsum is a good quality product because it contains that calcium and that sulfur that our soil needs to have a good structure and have a nice tilth so that it breaks up the clay, and then also to help aiding and processing the proteins and turning it into nitrogen. That's it for this episode of Organic Vegetable Gardening. Join us back next episode, which is about micronutrients. Thanks.